Hi, my name is Jackie Gabbert, and this is my assignment for Fort Hays State University's AEP 855 class, and this assignment is about inclusive leadership. For part one, I found two different articles. The first was The Next Generation of Workers, and this was by Ken Blanchard, and the second was Inclusive Leadership and Social Justice for Schools, and this is by James Ryan. And then I also looked at Jim Cowse's article on the top 10 leadership lessons. Inclusive Leadership for Schools. This was the article from James Ryan, and it talked about schools have traditionally used business leadership models, and for a while this was working all right, but as they kept going and kids changed and teachers changed, they started having issues with these types of leadership models. Achievement for all students needs something else. So if we're saying that we want all students to be college and career ready when they leave school, the basic leadership styles and management styles that we've seen in the past isn't working. Something interesting that they talked about was that inclusion is not just for special education. So we've all heard that we need to include special education students into our classrooms, which is great, but inclusion is just one part of it. Actually having all students be successful, and that means having them contribute, not just be present but also contribute, is important. And I talked about it for students, but this is also true for teachers and administrators, that including everybody is great, but having them also meaningfully contribute to the conversation, to the school, to their peers is very, very important. The second article that I read was by Ken Blanchard, and it talked about generational workers. And so it talked about there's four main generations, starting back in the 1920s and going all the way until the present time. And it talked about that belief and value development happens by the time you are 20, and it all incorporates things that you grew up around. So obviously my values and beliefs are going to be different because of what was happening in my life versus my grandparents' life. And something important to note was that different generations like different leadership styles, which makes sense. I am drawn towards a different leadership style than my parents would be. And it talked about how to bridge that leadership gap in the generations, as well as in the other article about inclusion leadership in school and how to bridge those gaps. And they both talked about giving opportunities to talk and to clear the air and to get any miscommunications or misinformation out into the open so that everyone's able to talk about it. Something else was acknowledging and celebrating differences, and this might be a generational difference, this could be a gender difference, this could be a socioeconomic difference, but celebrating and acknowledging those differences, and then using those differences for innovation and productivity. So my strength might be from a poverty standpoint, and I understand issues about poverty that maybe my coworker or my other teacher doesn't understand because he came from upper middle class. So using those different strengths as not only talking points but areas for innovation within the school and within the community. Part two talked about applying inclusive leadership and how to apply that in the educational world. So applying inclusive leadership, the article off Ken Blanchard's website talked about accommodating employee differences. So again, you think about accommodations, oh well, that has to do with accommodating students. But you could take that thought process and translate it into accommodating different teachers, different teaching styles, different leadership styles, as well as just different personalities. And if you really want people to feel included and to be a contributing factor, they need to feel welcome and they need to feel accommodated. To go along with that, creating workplace choices. So this, for example, this is what needs to be done. I don't care how it gets done. Here are a couple of ways that it could get done, and letting your teachers and your other administrators or people that are working with you decide which path they'd like to follow, but to still get a positive outcome. The third one was operate from a sophisticated management style. That's a mouthful, but basically what it talked about was when you're applying inclusive leadership, you can't just use one leadership style. So being able to move from leadership style to leadership style based on what's needed at the time from that specific person or group of people. For example, a younger generation person might like a transformational leadership style versus maybe a baby boomer would like more of a authentic leader, just to give you an example. Fourth was to be an inclusive leader, you should respect competence and initiative and celebrate that every time somebody does something and takes initiative to celebrate that. And then finally, nourish retention. So especially in the educational field, so many teachers drop out or quit teaching, especially within the first 5 to 10 years. So being able to nourish that and say, hey, we're glad you're here and we're glad that you're staying not only in our school but also in the educational field is really important. The second article was about implying inclusive leadership, was the James Ryan article, and he talked about advocating for inclusion and educating participants about this. So a lot of people and a lot of teachers or community members don't know, hey, we're trying to do this new leadership style, and here's what it is, and here's how you can be a successful participant or a successful, helpful person in getting this done. And it talked a lot about the same things as the Ken Blanchard article about opening the air, clearing the air, having dialogue. It did talk about the applying inclusive leadership works better in schools or communities that emphasize student learning and classroom practice, and adopting inclusive decision and policy making strategies. So not only just talking to the administrators but also talking to teachers and letting them be part of the decision making policy, and not just Board of Education members but all community members in helping to make decisions. And then finally, incorporating whole school approaches. So what's going to work well for this school at this time and help us move forward to the future. Some different ideas that I thought related well to inclusive leadership that we've talked about throughout this course from the Leadership Challenge book by Koos and Posner was trust and truly caring about others. And I don't think you can change leadership styles, especially moving to an inclusive leadership as a whole school, without trusting your other teachers, teachers trusting their employer and trusting their principal. Without that trust, I don't think any huge change like that is possible. And then also truly caring about others. If I feel like my boss truly cares about me, then I'm willing to trust them to move forward and say, yeah, I'm willing to try inclusive leadership. And as a building principal, I would think that remembering those two things, that my teachers need to know that I care about them, but also if I care about them, they're more willing to trust me and we're more willing to move forward and try new things. The leadership figure that I researched earlier in this course was Michael Fullen. And the main thing I thought that applied to this was creating conditions for teachers to succeed. And I think teachers are so overworked and stressed out, and they don't want to say, oh, one more thing would be we're going to try a new inclusive leadership for the whole school. And a lot of teachers will say, wow, it's just one more thing to think about. But creating a condition where, hey, this is really great, and not to change their thinking of this isn't just one more thing for you to do, this is something that's really going to help us move forward. When I was researching this and looking through different articles, I kept thinking, well, I'm an ag education teacher and I'm a female and I'm a young female, and a lot of these things that are saying, hey, you're being discriminated against because of gender or because of age really hit home, because I am a minority in my field. And if I could be able to in the future work through applying inclusive leadership as a building principal or things like that, I think that it would be less of a struggle for others like me in the future. Part 3, challenges of being an inclusive leader. I came up with 4 challenges, and I've touched up on a few of these. I think the biggest one is time, and I know all teachers and administrators are so short on time all the time, but especially now in this part of the semester, that they're going to think of it, if it's not presented right and it's not presented where they see your vision and see, hey, how this is going to help me, how this is going to help my students, they're going to say, I don't have time. And I think finding the time within professional development or whatever to really put the focus on inclusive leadership and saying this is really important and we're going to give you time to figure this out, I think is a huge challenge. I think that also a lot of administrators or teachers don't want to admit there's a problem. There's no problem. I'm including special needs students in my class. I'm including students of other races in my class. And that's difficult to change if they don't want to admit there's a problem. And so as a building principal, trying to figure out how to say, hey, I know you may not be discriminating against somebody on purpose, but this is something that we need to look at. And as a building principal myself, not letting my own unintentional discriminations taint what I'm trying to do. And then finally, it talked about that this should be adopted by the entire school and the community, and it's just having that dialogue over a period of time where the community trusts you and the school staff trusts you. I think it's just challenging to get everybody on board and to see the vision and to see the future as it would be drawn out. Here are my sources that I used, and thank you for watching.